more on that story coming up, but first let's return now to our top story this hour. The conveyancing firm used by the Deputy Prime Minister here in the UK, Angela Rayner, to buy a second property has said it did not give her tax advice. Ms Rayner referred herself to the Independent Advisor on Ministerial Interests yesterday after admitting she'd underpaid stamp duty on the property and blaming what she called incorrect advice from her lawyers for failing to pay the correct tax. Her allies say she took legal advice from her conveyancer and from two experts on trust law. This latest development comes after the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, repeatedly refused to say if he would sack Angela Rayner as Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Secretary if an inquiry concludes she broke the ministerial code. Well, let's talk now to the political communications strategist Joe Tanner, who worked on Boris Johnson's 2008 mayoral campaign. Joe, great to have you on the programme with us. Thank you very much for your time. How difficult is it going to be for Angela Rayner to hang tough on this while we wait for the report into what's happened, given that she's admitted she paid the incorrect amount of stamp duty, albeit blaming it on legal advice?
This is a really tricky one because we've already seen there's been some graffiti on the property in Brighton, and there's also been these claims coming from some of the firms that have been involved in this property deal who have said that they were not involved in providing direct advice. So the problem with this sort of period of waiting for some sort of judgment, I suppose, on Angela Rayner's behaviour that we're waiting for from the ethics advisor means that there's a void that's ultimately being filled in other ways. So it is a huge sort of waiting game and probably very uncomfortable. And as we've seen, the Prime Minister's been sort of repeatedly asked the question to sort of almost prejudge what's coming from that ethics advisor. So it's just a case of sitting and waiting for now.
If you were advising Angela Rayner now, and if you were advising the Prime Minister now, what would you be saying to them?
Well, I think there's a few things. The issue is that sometimes with all these, with these situations, it is not always the actual offence itself that's the problem. It's the lines that came up around it. So it could well be that part of the problem is about suggesting that it was legal advice that you'd taken and that that's the problem. But if the problem is actually that the information you provided to those people that gave you the advice was flawed, then actually it's you that have perhaps been careless or very sort of willfully obstructive or misleading in your approach. Now, I'm not suggesting that's what's happened. This could well be some sort of quite simple mistake, but something that with it, this whole decision is about, when you talk about someone's position being tenable or not, one of the challenges is that you are the Secretary of State for Housing. That's under your brief, which then becomes potentially untenable if you've been careless around your affairs relating to property when you are the person in charge. So part of these issues are not just about the handling afterwards, it's actually about what you say the very first moment those questions come in. That answer can be the thing that is your downfall rather than the so-called offence itself.
And in terms of Keir Starmer and how he's handling this so far, as we mentioned, he's refusing to say repeatedly if he would sack her, if this independent advisor comes back and finds an issue with what Angela Rayner did. What would you be saying to him right now? Because he's getting criticised, isn't he? If he does something, he's getting criticised. If he doesn't do something for the moment, he's also getting criticised.
Yeah, and I think there is a little bit of he can't really win because ultimately he's been told something by his deputy, one of his key allies. The Deputy Prime Minister of the country has told him that there was nothing to see here. So, in any workplace, if your colleague were to say to you, this is fine, there's nothing going on here, your first instinct would be to try and believe them. But then obviously when this submission came forward to say that she realised there was a problem and that she was putting herself forward, she was referring herself to the ethics advisor. Now, that means there is a process, and it's a bit like, Keir Starmer's comfortable with this. It's like legal cases that he was used to. There is a process, you do not interfere with it. Why would he prejudge it by having any commentary to the media in the meantime? However, the judgment and the wording of the judgment, it could be that Angela Rayner hasn't broken the ministerial code as such, but is deemed as being seen to have been careless perhaps in the way that she behaved. Now, that is a real problem when you've had a government that have been flying kites around potential changes to housing taxes, for example, taxes that affect homeowners and the purchase of property. That becomes very difficult to have a housing secretary who is then somebody that managed to get it wrong. So it's not necessarily about breaking rules, not breaking rules. It's actually about whether you are sort of credible, I suppose, to be in the job. So it's not a simple black and white issue. I think there are many shades of grey here that the Prime Minister is going to have to consider, and he's going to have to decide whether he's going to sort of have potentially a very difficult conversation with his deputy. And it may be that Angela herself says, you know, I can ride this out, or she may say, look, given the wording, I simply can't. It's going to really come down to how that judgment is worded and what really comes out from what the ethics advisor was allowed to see, what he was able to see, and how Angela Rayner actually conducted herself throughout this.
OK, Jo Tanner, thank you very much.